Hey y'all, I'm Karen Mayer Cunningham, the special education boss. If you've ever felt confused, overwhelmed, or just plain frustrated at the 504 IEP table, you are in the right place. Every week, I'm breaking down the rules, the rights, and the realities of special education so you can walk into meetings informed, empowered, and ready to make real change. And whether you're a parent, a teacher, an advocate, a school-based member, or somebody who's just trying to do right by a student, this podcast gives you straight talk, real answers, and tools that you can use immediately. I'm not here to play politics. I'm not here to play sides. I'm here to train people who sit at the table and teach you how to follow the law, ask the right questions, and protect the rights of students. So go ahead and hit subscribe, share this with a friend, and you know what? Meet me back here every single week. We're not just talking about change. We're making it. Because when you know better, you do better. And when we get it right for the child, we get it right for everybody. Hey, you guys, good evening. Welcome in. We are doing a webinar tonight on the continuum of special education services. If we haven't met, I'm Karen Mayer Cunningham, special education boss, training everyone that sits at the 504 IEP table to navigate and negotiate successful student outcomes. And this is probably one of the biggest myth busters or wrong or misinformation, or people just have no idea actually what it means. So the continuum of services is a requirement under IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. And that simply means that we have to look at and talk about and provide options of a continuum of services to students with disabilities. Now, that section of the law is called LRE, Least Restrictive Environment. And sometimes I like to say the most supported environment. Sometimes it's a little bit easier to understand. Least restrictive is a double negative. It's hard for people to understand. What I see in trainings and teachers and parents across the United States and on social media is that people think least restrictive environment is general education, and that is not correct. Least restrictive environment is not a location, it's a consideration, right? And what are we considering? We're considering the right place across content areas to implement the student's IEP, supplementary aid supports and services. And so the law calls it extent of non-participation, the extent of non-participation. And so there are some students from 3 to 22 that will never be in general education. That would not be an appropriate setting. And so I think for people, it might just be easier, instead of thinking about least restrictive environment, that we just talked about what is the most appropriate setting for the student based on their unique circumstances. See, the law says that we are required to write the student's IEP to enable them to make progress. The school has to enable the student to make progress in light of their unique circumstances. And so their unique circumstances are not the names of their eligibilities, but it's the totality of their disability, their comorbidities, and how that shows up in a school setting. I say from bell to bell, and sometimes it's from bus to bus. And so let's talk about these 4 buckets, if you will. And we have a more robust course on all of this if you want to take that, but this is just going to go over these 4 buckets I want you to think about when you're talking about a child with a disability. And they're not good news, they're not bad news, they're just considerations that we're going to talk about so that we make sure that we have given the parent the opportunity to make what? An informed decision. So there's nothing more that new parents that I have are upset about when they were not provided the totality of information. And unfortunately, when I first started in special education, I thought these people at the school, they know stuff and they're not telling me. And the truth is, they don't know. They don't know. It takes 7 years to get a law degree. And we're talking about the federal law for special education, which used to be over 300 pages long. Now it's only 115 pages long. And we are sitting across the table from really nice people at a school district who have 0 training in special education law. Did they take a law class, a special ed law class, a semester or 2 in college? Yes. Can you imagine if your attorney had a semester of law training? No, because the law is so robust and each law area is its own specificity. While I love people in school districts, they've changed the lives of every kid that I've ever served in special ed and my own kid. I don't find that they are trained in special education law, state requirements and regulations, and the application of that. And so it's important that you know what these requirements are and your rights are. And so let's talk about this first bucket. And this first bucket I want to talk about is general education. And general education, there's so many ways that a special education student could be served in a general education class. Let's just talk about, we'll just use reading as a content area, right? So let's say a child has an identified disability, and in general ed class in reading, that disability does not impact him in a way that needs a lot of support. And let's say that they're just in general ed in reading, they have an identified disability, they have an IEP, and they just need accommodations. So the student could be in general education with accommodations. That's one way. Next, he could be in general education with accommodations with an IEP goal, right? We've identified that he needs an individualized education plan and he needs an annual goal in the area of reading, right? So in that class, he'll have an IEP goal, he'll have accommodations, and he'll have in-class support, ICS. So in-class support means that there is a support person there that's going to help implement the IEP goal, take data, and provide that student additional support that solely could not only just be provided by the general education teacher. Second way we could have it in general ed, we could have a student in general education that has an IEP goal in that content area and reading. They have accommodations, and that the teacher, the second person in the classroom, is a co-teacher. And that means that person is a certified teacher who is certified in special education. And then that class is taught completely in tandem for the entire content. So let's say for purposes, the class is 60 minutes long, then both of those teachers will be there and be available for the student, the totality of that class. And so there's variations on any of those. There are variations on the in-class support time. Who can be the in-class support person in a general ed setting? It could be an aide. It could be a level 1, 2, 3 or aide. It could be a paraprofessional. It could be a long-term sub. It could be a special educator. It could be a related service provider. It could be a number of things. So it's very important when you have your child who has special education needs, an IEP, and they're in a general ed setting, that you find out who is the second teacher. And that's what I say, when you're in the IEP meeting, you just want to say, Alicia, can you tell me who the second teacher is in reading? And that you write that information down so that you understand, is that a paraprofessional? I love paraprofessionals. I love them. They are not special educators. That's not what they are. Even if somebody says this is a special education para, this is a special education aide, they're aides and they're amazing people, but they're not certified teachers. Additionally, they're not certified special education teachers. And so I want to remind you, in these 47 years of the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, which started in 1975, it's now 2023, there has never been, my love, a waiver for special education teachers or related service providers. So while we have lots of places in America, due to a lot of reasons, that have teaching certificates that are not fully completed, or short-term certificates or exceptions, there are no exceptions to special education teachers. So you should know that. There was a very robust letter that came out in October of 2022 from OSEP, the Office of Special Education Programs, reminding states and districts and counties and cities everywhere that special education can only be delivered by a special educator. So it's very important that if your child only receives special education services as in-class support, that you make sure that in-class support person is in fact a special educator. Second bucket we're going to look at is my favorite bucket. And that bucket is resource. And for whatever goofy reason, for the last 4, 5, 6 years, we've told people all over the great United States, we got rid of that. We got rid of it. We're not doing that anymore. And here's the good news, kids. We didn't get rid of it. It's like in the federal law. And no state has the right to reduce the benefit of IDEA. They can increase it, but you can't reduce it. So resource is a class setting for students that are special education students, and there are no non-disabled peers in there. There are no non-disabled peers. And so while it's a general statement, most of those students in resource classes are a couple to several years behind academically. It's not intended to be a behavioral class. It's a slower pace. It's a smaller ratio. That's the intention. It's a smaller ratio. And it's for kiddos that have modified work. And so what does modified mean? It means the learner expectation is different than general ed students who are held to the state standard. So you could have a special education student in general ed with a co-teacher, and you could modify their work in general education. But sometimes modifying that work while they sit in a general education class is not beneficial. And so we talk about a resource setting where that work is also modified. It's a slower pace. We're not doing the depth and the breadth of the state standards wherever you are, but we're working on filling in those gaps and looking at the most important pieces of content to make sure that they've accessed that standard and that we've measured that. A lot of parents are told, I actually was in an IEP meeting today, and the parent was told, if their child is in special education, it's going to mess up their graduation plan. The child is 7. As I tell everybody, if you have questions about any graduation or those standards, reach out to your Department of Education, because if it sounds like it's goofy, it's probably goofy. And that just means that we change the learner's expectation. What we don't have is modified curriculum. So I don't pick up a 7th grade history book in Texas and read it to the 7th grade history class and then go, oh, Billy and Sally are in resource. Let me get my modified book, modified curriculum. But we change the learner's expectation. It's probably the most expensive setting in the school district, which is probably why there's so much. We got rid of it, and we now have flipped to this sort of all inclusion model, which was never the intent and never has been the intent of the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. I've also been in meetings in the last couple of years where they've said, Ms. Cunningham, if he goes to resource math in 7th grade, he'll be the only 7th grade math student. So, well, that's surprising, since the junior high has 1,500 kids. Just can't believe that every kid in here is on grade level. But even if he's the only student, he's going to get the targeted intervention that he needs. Okay. So that's resource. So the first bucket is general ed. Lots of different ways we can do that. Second one is resource. Okay. The third one is going to be a self-contained setting. And we have a lot of different types of self-contained settings. Probably wish we'd had a different name for it. I call these programs. They're not going to be at every campus, at every school. It's not possible. That funding is not available. But these are programs for kiddos that need a very structured setting that's highly supported, that can give them the right benefit of their IEP. And so some of them, we know they start early. We have the ECSC, Early Childhood Special Education. That's for our littles, I call them 3 to 5. And then we have the 18 to 21 program, which is obviously after you've finished acquiring all of your high school credits, but you still need some schooling to make you ready for post-secondary success, gainful employment, independent living, and further education. And then in the middle, between kindergarten and senior year, we have other settings, and they're all called something different. And we have goofy acronyms. We have the Apple, ASIP, all sorts of things. We just rename it something else. And most of those settings are going to be for a very specific type of population of special education. And so it's very important that you don't ask for a setting that's not appropriate for your kiddo. Let's take, for instance, autism, probably the number one identified eligibility for the kiddos that I work with. There are some districts that have autism programs, but they're really for a certain percentage of kiddos identified with autism in that district. For instance, there's a district here in the area, and they have a program that's for kiddos that are, as it was described to me, driven by their autism. They're highly mobile and have to move from content to content. And then they also have another autism program for kiddos that have autism, and they additionally have an intellectual disability. So it's very important that when a parent is deciding on if that's appropriate for them, remember, when we're in special education, there's always two things, right? Meaningful benefit and harmful effect. And so it's important, as the advocate, as your friend, as a school-based member, however you're supporting somebody, that you tell them what that looks like, right? And what could be the benefit of it and what might be the harm, right? Additionally, we have a setting called life skills, or an alternate setting. We call it something different all over the United States, but that is an alternate curriculum. And what that means is that the state has given that setting, those teachers, those students, what I would call great liberty, but they're working on functional skills. They're working on functional academics, functional needs, and really working on life skills. Those students Not all of them, but probably most of them might have the possibility of needing guardianship, meaning that they'll need care for a lifetime. And I have kiddos that are in all three of these settings. I have kiddos that are in some life skills, they're in some resource, and they're in some gen ed. So I want you to know it's not a one and done. You don't get this and you can't have that. We also have settings that are called adaptive behavior units. We have social emotional units, which is called different things, sensory units. And so those are for kiddos that they need maximum support as it relates to their emotional regulations. And so this is really a big, broad brushstroke, but that's our third bucket. Okay. And then our fourth bucket is something that I find that school districts rarely, I don't want to say never, but rarely talk about. And that is out of district placement, out of district placement. And there are some kiddos that their level of need based on the acuity of their disability cannot be served in a school district. There are some kiddos that need a different level of support. And this is a generalization, but it's going to be my kiddos that have probably unique behavioral needs. They need access to medical, and then they also might need access to physicians during the day. They might need access to a very high level of behavioral intervention or a very high level of an LPC or a doctor as it relates to their counseling needs. And so that's called out of district placement. Okay. And then I know I said 4 buckets, but there's one more bucket. I'm not really good with math. And then the 5th bucket is going to be homebound. Now, there's some other settings, obviously, if you're in the hospital or if a student's participating in the criminal justice system, both of those require education if it's appropriate for the parent. But homebound instruction is a student who is expected to miss up to 4 weeks of school, led by a physician's letter, a medical doctor, that recommends the student receive their educational instruction in a homebound setting. You can split that up into half homebound, half school. That's a hard thing to do, but that happens. Homebound can be for general ed, 504, or special education students. And when you receive homebound instruction, obviously an adult has to be home with that student, and that homebound teacher, and this is approximation, is going to give you about 4 hours of instruction a week. And we're going to be doing those 4 core classes. If you receive related or instructional services, that might be available to you in a homebound setting. So again, we have the first bucket, general ed, second bucket, resource. So only special ed kiddos that are several years behind academically. A third bucket, self-contained. Fourth bucket, out of district placement. And then the 5th bucket is going to be homebound instruction. And so I find that the more specialized outside of general ed, the more misinformation is out there. So I don't want you to have misinformation. When we sit in school-based meetings, we have the gift of persuasion. I want to make sure that we're all ethical and we're all persuading the parents with real valid information, because at the end of the day, it's not my child, it's their child. And they need to make an informed decision about what's appropriate for your child, for their child. And also as an advocate, it's not your decision. And you could be an advocate for 100 years and you really believe that your client should take this setting. But ultimately, it's the parent's decision. They're going to be able to make an informed decision about what's best for their child and their family when we give them the totality of the information. So I hope that's helpful. I hope that gives you a better framework of what is available out there. What you should know is that no district is going to list all of these options for you on their website. I have families go, what page on the website is it? It's like my hair color. It's invisible, right? It's not going to be listed on the website. They don't have a requirement to list it on the website. Additionally, you should know at this continuum of services, a lot of times people want to go and see that setting. I want to go see the self-contained setting. And while the school will set that up and let you see that, you're not going to see it while the class is going on for obvious reasons. So they'll let you meet the teacher ahead of time before school starts or after school, but you won't get to see the class in action. I have kiddos in all different settings. I have kiddos who are out of district placement. I have kiddos that are in psychiatric units. I have kiddos that have participated in the criminal justice system. I have kiddos in resource and self-contained settings, and it's about what's right for the kiddo. It's hard for parents to set aside their hopes and dreams and beliefs of their kiddo, and it sometimes skews their ability to make a decision but we're talking about 36 instructional weeks, right? We're not going to scare people with your graduation diploma and this is going to happen. We're going to talk about what is appropriate for this kiddo for this next 36 weeks so we can maximize his IEP. Okay. So Alicia, I know we have some questions. We certainly want to get to those.
Yes, and our first one is a little bit long. So are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, so this is from an anonymous attendee. It says, does RSP class over Gen Ed mean a student wouldn't be able to get a diploma from high school? That is the information I'm given as to keep him in Gen Ed class that currently is not supportive to needs in science. This is a junior high student. They seem to only offer SDC, Gen Ed, or co-taught, but right now bordering failing science. Gen Ed class, science Gen Ed class, and behind grade level in reading, he does have accommodations, but it doesn't seem to be enough. Fails test and quiz, although he retakes it and will fail it again. But if I address that, it'll magically, the very next time, about the concern for mastery and what supports were given to get his 100% best score of the entire class. And then they reply, oh, he passed with 100. He's doing great. I don't believe that, but I'm not sure how to proceed and address that.
I don't know what RPC stands for or RPS. All over the United States, we have different acronyms. When somebody gives you information and it feels like a threat, it's usually not true. If you do this, you're going to get this. So the best thing to do is reach out to your Department of Education. I advocate in all 52 million states. I've never had a child not get a diploma. This you're not getting a diploma thing seems to be hot off the press. Every kid that I've ever advocated for 27 years gets a diploma. Now, if you're going to go on and participate in the 18 to 21 plus program, you don't receive your diploma, even though you might walk when you're a senior, until you finish receiving those special education services. I would email your Department of Education, Florida Department of Education, Wisconsin Department of Public Information. I was talking to them today. Texas Education Agency, wherever you are. Every state education agency is amazing, and say, can you tell me the graduation requirements for children in special education? And can you tell me the types of diplomas or certifications that are issued in our state? I'm not saying that somebody's lying to you, but that sounds like it's not accurate. And it sounds like they're pressuring you to keep you in a setting that's cost effective. And so I always say, and it doesn't sound lovely and nice, I don't have another way to say it, it's much cheaper to get one babysitter for 10 kids than 10 babysitters for 10 kids. And a lot of times the level of support that your student needs is going to require additional staffing. And the person that's giving you information is being pressured by the bean counter somewhere in the school district.
Thank you. What is the best approach to take on a school district that doesn't seem to be moved from their position of being a child in the most restrictive environment?
Schools are sometimes not moved. So we make decisions based on one 4-letter word, data. And so whatever they're proposing, providing, or giving you as an option, they should have data to support that decision, not just persuasive talking. And so where is the data? A lot of times when we have kids come out of ESE, early childhood special education, that had maybe an intellectual disability or a disability where they're in a wheelchair or they have a sensory disability, we'll just say, oh, they're just going straight to life skills in kindergarten. I'm like, we didn't do the least restrictive environment. The least restrictive environment says that we educate students with disabilities with their non-disabled peers to the maximum extent possible with supplementary aids and supports. Now, sometimes it's not possible, but not if you never tried it. So I'm going to say to the committee, this is a continuum of services, right? General ed accommodations, general ed special education support, resource, like we just don't go from general ed to, oh, you're in self-contained. That is not a continuum of services. We have to try this and we have to do all that we can to make it work. And when it doesn't work, then we can look at the next thing. We can't just go, yeah, he can't be in here. We don't have kids like that in here. That would make me greatly concerned that I don't know what kids like that are, but your criteria has to go on that continuum, right? I tried this. It didn't work. Now we're trying this, a higher level of support, but we just don't go from A to Z and go, that's how we're going to do it.
Perfect. And what is the best data to request from the data to ask from the district to help the consideration of LRE?
Yeah, so I'm going to need to get a copy of your raw data collection sheets on the IEP goals that you collected weekly from the implementers, the general education teacher and the special education teacher and the related service providers. Can I pick those up like on a VHS tape, a zip drive, a scroll, photocopied? You let me know. Yeah, the data drives all decisions. And that's what teachers do all the time, whatever kind of teacher you are. You teach and then you test and you collect data to see if your teaching was what? Effectual. So it's what teachers do all day long.
Perfect. And this one's from Jennifer. I'm a kindergarten inclusion teacher. My district is one of those that quote unquote got rid of the resource setting. They have great ways of making it sound so much better that we push inclusion. What do you suggest a teacher do when we know what we are being forced to do is wrong? I can't force a parent to get an advocate. I have even been reprimanded for suggesting it. I am forced to write IEPs based on what the district offers, not what the student needs. We have the full inclusion and special programs with nothing in between.
Yeah. So I think it's amazing. It's like a new thing, like it's a new hairdo. This year we're doing full inclusion. In LRE, in the least restrictive environment, there's a little sentence in there and it says, does the student's disability impact his learning or the learning of others? It would not be appropriate for every special education student to be in with general education students. Their disability at certain moments would impact the other people's ability to learn. So it's not just the special education student that we consider, it's the non-disabled student, right? So we hear that a lot for the last 2 or 3 years that we've been doing the academy, and which is the reason we started this, because a lot of teachers are being required to do things that respectfully are unethical and illegal. They're both, right? It goes against the oath that you took to be a teacher. And so sometimes teachers decide it's easier to help kids from the outside in after they've been reprimanded and corrected. We have a teacher that she's just wrapping up her school year and she's gonna be an advocate. And I think her boss pulled her aside. She started in the spring doing the rest of her training with us, her mastermind, and her leader said, "Are you going to be able to play ball with us?" I didn't know that teaching was a contact sport. And she's been a teacher for over 20 years. She's the best of the best. But she's not allowed to do and serve students the way that she wants to and the way it's just right. And so it's unfortunate that we hear these stories sometimes from school districts, but if that's the case and you don't feel comfortable doing that, certainly come and join us on the academy. We would love to train you to be an advocate.
Thank you. Okay, and then we have one from the chat. It says, as for continuum of service, our middle school has inclusion, which includes about 35 students, 20 have 504 IEPs. There's just a support person, not a SPED trained person in the classroom. The other setting is a resource room, and that's for the kids that are almost on grade level but are floundering in inclusion with lots of accommodations. School is not offering a co-teach setting or anything in between. What are the parents' options?
You have to offer, not necessarily a co-teach model, but you have to offer a student could be modified in general ed with a special education teacher there for part of the time. So that would be illegal, which is the opposite of legal.
Jennifer said she's thought about it. Stop thinking, Jennifer, just come on.
Come on.
And then Julie said she wants to come to your summer advocate program in June.
It will be fantastic, Julie. Just know it'll be swampy here. It will not be 55 degrees.
Okay, and then we have one that says, can a student receive resource for only one subject area like ELA in middle school?
Absolutely. You can read. Yeah, absolutely. It's not a one and done. I have a kiddo who is in life skills, but he is in honors orchestra in high school. Humans are amazing, right? So we look at each content area and where's the right place to implement their IEP at that time.
Perfect. Okay, this one says, If the FIE does not show a need for in-class support, can it be provided for behavior? This student has diagnosed ADHD and significantly needs assistance, especially in writing. But I have been told his evaluation doesn't show the need for support. He's 6 years old and in the first grade.
So behavior is a need. So when we look at a child's need, it's not academic, right? Do they have an educational need? Do they have a functional need, a communicative need, a behavior need, an emotional need, an attention need, a social need? There's all kinds of needs. So whether it is, I need to sit here and teach you strategies for writing, or I need you to teach you strategies for not putting your hands on your friends all day, that's something that I teach through specially designed instruction, special education.
It works if I unmute myself.
It does. It's a new thing that we're doing, unmuting.
It's crazy. Okay.
It's your least restrictive talking.
Correct. Gen Ed teacher with para in 3 or 4 core classes. Should the school be able to show evidence of collaboration and or planning between the Gen Ed and the special education teacher for my student?
A para is not a special education teacher. So the question is, who is teaching your child? What you need to ask this at the table. Who comes and works with Billy on his reading goal? So a general ed teacher is a general ed teacher. A para, I love them. They're not special educators. The IEP indicates that you take federal funds. So who's doing the special educating? And I think you'd be stunned to find, I'm going to say over 50% of the IEPs in America have nobody doing any special education. Is that fair, Alicia? Is that what we see?
Yes, absolutely. Okay, and then here's the next one. Where can I get more training on this topic?
So we have a longer class available kind of as an a la carte item. These things are things that we talk about on our Special Education Academy, which we have every Tuesday night. And we certainly want you guys to join us. If you're watching this webinar, we can get you a free coupon. Just email us at advocate@specialeducationacademy.com. That'll give you 2 weeks for free, because our heart is to equip people. And because the more that we all know the truth in a way that's understandable and it's normal human talk, the better we can have outcomes for students with disabilities.
All right. Are there rules for how far the student can be away from home campus if they need to go to a quote unquote centralized campus?
No rules. My son, when he was in special education, he was just a little guy. I think he was a second grader. Our house literally, if I was washing dishes, I could see the parking lot where the buses came in. That's how close we were to our elementary school. That's why we bought our house there. And he had to be in a program for autism, and he went to the furthest campus in the school district. But it was exactly the setting that he needed to be successful.
Amen to that. Mine's 15 miles from the house and we have one in our backyard. So
yes. You're like,
okay.
Oh. Yeah.
Hey kids that aren't mine. All right. Working with a family that has a youth on a 504, I was able to get the family to have the school do assessments for an IEP. They're in the 8th grade, they're failing classes and have suspected SLDs around reading and math and ADHD. Parent is now just getting back to thinking youth is lazy, although it's more clear that there's a disability, but they're not willing to come to terms with that. How have you been able to help a kiddo in this, and the school is running with the fact that it's not at terms with, therefore not even pushing advocating for the youth? How have you been successfully helping kiddos like this?
So I am obsessed with a person's cognitive profile. There's 7 Gs. Those are brain skills. We actually have a training on it. I don't know how many weeks it is, Alicia, but we have many weeks long training. If I can look at your cognitive profile, which is done when we do assessments, I can tell you what's going on with a kiddo. I can tell you why you think he's lazy. I can describe your child and have never met them. But I understand what the standard scores are. I understand what the deviations are. I understand what fluid reasoning means, auditory processing, short-term working memory, visual processing, long-term retrieval. And if you don't know what those mean, you don't know what the numbers mean and the impact on the student and how that might show up in a classroom, then I sit with people every year that say, he's lazy. Don't you pay attention? Oh my God, I've already told you this 1,000 times. Why can't you do what I've told you to do the first time? And as parents, we've all said goofy things to our kiddos because we assume things. So the cognitive profile, your diagnostic cognitive profile is gold. And so a lot of times when I'm with families like that, I break down their cognitive profile and it gives them an understanding of who their child is, because your cognition is just the way you're cooked. You're not going to change it. You're not going to remediate it. You're not going to teach it a new skill. It's how you take in, synthesize, keep, and sort and retrieve information. And so when you can explain that to a family, it can be life-changing.
Perfect. And then Julie asked, have you had much work with BCBA's behavior analyst?
I have. They are amazing. They're quite the smarty pants, and they will take some data.
They are good at the data. All right. Jennifer says, my son has autism and ADHD. The school lists ADHD and OHI, but refused to list autism on his IEP. Would that make a difference if autism was on there?
So it makes a difference what the eligibility is, because that's going to drive support services and IEP goals. So I would say, is autism a medical diagnosis, and does it rise to the level of meeting an educational need? So you could have an autism diagnosis, but that need doesn't show up as an educational need at school. For instance, might have a child that has autism that has a very high IQ. And while they might have some uniquenesses and maybe some fidgeting, it doesn't impact their success on a level that requires specially designed instruction to teach them a skill based on a deficit. So again, I don't have your testing, but it would make a difference if there's a skill that we need to teach around the characteristics of autism, because that's different than ADHD.
Perfect. And then what 2-day intensive trainings do you have coming up? Are they in person or virtual?
Yes. So that's a trick question. So we have an in-person coming up in June. I know we have one later in the summer. We have the 2-day, which is on demand. We just had a virtual. We're going to schedule another one, I think in June, Alicia. But the 2-day in person is already scheduled. The virtual on demand is available for you anytime, but we'll have another virtual coming up in probably a month or two.
Yes, we're doing in June because we're trying to go to Dallas in July and St. Louis. So trying to take this on the road. Okay, ready?
Right.
Year preschool, recently diagnosed with autism and expressive and receptive speech delay and sensory processing disorder. I'm sorry, it moved. Achieved all goals on the last IEP, annual IEP evals and reeval done. They want to place the 4-year-old in a partial inclusion program, but state no behavior problems. All sensory driven. Parent conferences are all positive. Achieved goals in the last IEP. District says community goal is tied to this program. Is that true? They moved social skills to Gen Ed, which they said is part of the program.
Okay. So that was a lot of words. A lot of words. Yeah. So there's no Gen Ed for 4-year-olds. There are districts that have some general ed 4-year-olds or non-disabled 4-year-olds because of options in the school district. They might be kiddos that are, their parents work at the school district. They might be ESL students that English is their second language, but there's no requirement for general ed for 4-year-olds in America. So there's a lot of bundling of kiddos. I always say that ECSC is a gift, and I don't usually try to move it around a lot as it relates to 3, 4, and 5-year-olds. Sometimes we do the same thing, but we call it a different name. If you think your child is benefiting from the 3 to 5-year-old program, I would stay there. If they're not benefiting, then I would not stay there. But community goal, I don't know what 4-year-old has a community goal.
She also added that her child is already doing 24 hours of ABA between at home and in a center.
Oh, that's a lot of 4-year-olding. For me, if I have kiddos, and this is just a Karen thing, if I had a child that was 4 and they had 24 hours in ABA, I would probably ask my client to choose. ABA is amazing. Special education in public school is amazing. They're two totally different things. And I think that it sometimes brings confusion and then frustration to the members of the committee and the professionals that work in those two different settings and the parents. Have I ever told you to choose, Alicia?
Every time. Okay. This one says, so my student has had an evaluation and has been diagnosed with dyslexia, but they were D&Q'd for special education. Is this a regular occurrence?
Unfortunately, yes. So dyslexia, there's no diagnosis in school for dyslexia. We don't make diagnoses in schools. We make determinations. A dyslexia is the one condition that can be served under general ed in school or special ed. So based on the acuity of your dyslexia, does it rise to the level of needing that instruction to come from a special educator?
And dare I say that was the last question?
Okay. That's when 15 more questions pop up.
That's
So
when they all
thanks you
start,
guys
"Oh,
for
no, no."
thanks you guys for joining us. We greatly appreciate it. If there's some other webinars you would like to see, just email us at advocate@specialeducationacademy.com. We love you and appreciate all you do for kiddos. Remember, when you get it right for the student, you get it right for everybody. And we'll see you guys in the next training. Hit subscribe, share this with a friend, and you know what? Meet me back here every single week. We're not just talking about change, we're making it. Because when you know better, you do better. And when we get it right for the child, we get it right for everybody.